He texted his wife, "Marcin's gone." But fate had a twisted sense of humor. Just an hour later, it was Marcin Koskan, the man he thought was dead, who was burying him in a deep crevasse on Gasherbrum. Artur Heiser's entire life was a dance on the edge of an abyss. He watched the south face of Lhotse claim the legendary Jerzy Kukuczka. He listened over the radio as his own students perished on Broad Peak. He built an empire of ice warriors, but the mountains always collect their due. So, how did a man who survived where so many others had fallen become the victim of a fatal mistake himself? Let's rewind the tape. Picture a backpack that weighs more than the person carrying it. That's the image where Artur Heiser's story begins. The year is 1976. Poland is locked behind the Iron Curtain, surrounded by the gray, everyday life of Silesia. But a 14-year-old Artur finds his escape in another dimension. He walks into the Harser Mountaineering Club and makes his ambitions clear from day one. His physical abilities immediately stun the instructors. While others are breaking under the weight of their gear on the approach, Heiser just keeps going. He takes on double, sometimes triple the standard load, and just keeps moving upward. It was in the rocky couloirs of the Tatras during the legendary training courses at Betlejemka that he earned his nickname. His comrades watched him, hauling tons of gear and provisions without a single complaint, and someone threw out a word that stuck with him forever: the elephant. From then on, he was the elephant to everyone. And it wasn't a joke. It was a recognition of his phenomenal, almost superhuman endurance. But brute force was only one side of the coin. In a time of total scarcity, when you couldn't just buy proper equipment in stores, Artur revealed an unexpected talent. He sat down at a sewing machine. At night, in his room, he would transform old fabrics into professional-grade down jackets and backpacks. His creations looked better than anything from a factory. Even as a teenager, the calculating manager and gifted designer was already waking up inside him. He understood. If you want to survive in the mountains, you have to be prepared for everything, right down to the last stitch on your jacket. His energy demanded a bigger stage, and he moved up to the major leagues, the Academic Alpine Club in Katowice. They called it Kukuczka's Club, a true breeding ground for future legends. Getting in meant you had a ticket to the big time. Heiser didn't get lost in the shadows of these giants. By the early 80s, he was no longer just the guy who carried the heavy loads. 1981 was his breakout year in the Alps. The elephant proved he could also be fast. He made speed ascents of the Petit Dru and Mont Blanc. Where others took days, he took hours. Artur was demonstrating a frightening efficiency. He took charge of organizing trips, arranging transport, securing funding. In his early 20s, he was already acting like a seasoned strategist. Everyone could see it. This guy didn't just want to climb to the summit. He wanted to lead others there. And soon, the mountains would give him a chance to test that ambition at an altitude where the air itself becomes a deadly enemy. 6,000 meters. It's an invisible wall. Beyond it, sport ends and a completely different game begins. In 1982, Heiser crossed that line. The Alps, with their cozy huts and rescue helicopters, were left far behind. Artur found himself in Nepal, in the wild and little explored Rolwalling region. There are no well-trodden paths here, and the maps often lie. His objective? The peak of Gauri Shankar, 6,126 meters high. This wasn't just an ascent, it was a first ascent. Heiser was going where no human had ever set foot. He moved along the razor's edge of the unknown, feeling his way forward, meter by meter. When he stood on the summit, he realized the most important thing. His body worked like a Swiss watch at altitude. The hypoxia that brought other climbers to their knees only seemed to fuel him. But the real test of his mettle came a year later, 1983. The Hindu Kush. Before him stood Tirik Mir, the mountain of darkness, the highest point of the entire range, 7,708 meters. This was the doorstep of the death zone. Here, every breath is a battle, and the cold seeps into your bones even in the warmest down jackets, which Heiser still sewed himself. It was here that fate brought him together with Rafał Choda. Choda was a seasoned veteran. He already knew the taste of the great ranges. For the young Heiser, he became a guide into a world of extreme exertion. They worked like a single machine. Artur watched his partner, absorbing every movement, every decision. On the slopes of Tirich Mir, Hadzer learned his most important lesson. You don't conquer big mountains with a quick assault, you conquer them with a siege. He saw the underbelly of Himalayan expeditions. It wasn't about romantic campfires, it was about brutal logistics, caravans of porters, tons of gear, setting up intermediate camps, the endless back and forth to acclimatize. Artur fell in love with this mathematics of survival. He understood how to manage the chaos, how to calculate strength and supplies for weeks on end. When he returned from the Hindu Kush, he was no longer just a strong kid from Katowice. He was now a high-altitude mountaineer, ready to take on the 8,000ers. 3 vertical kilometers of ice separate life from death on the south face of Lhotse. It's not just a slope, it's one of the most terrifying walls in the Himalayas, a challenge climbers in the 20th century were already calling the problem of the 21st. The year is 1985. Artur Heizer stands before this monster. The stakes are now as high as they get. He's operating at 8,000 meters in the death zone, where brain cells begin to die from oxygen deprivation. Beside him is his trusted partner from the Hindu Kush, Rafał Choda. They move in a single rhythm, trying to push through to the summit, but the mountain makes its own rules. The weather turns, the wind grinds the air into ice crystals, and they make the hard decision. Turn back. The summit was so close, but life was more precious. They begin their descent, utterly exhausted, dreaming of nothing but a hot cup of tea in the tent of their high camp. And then it happens. The thing that every person who has ever tied a figure-8 knot fears. A split second of lost concentration. Rafał Choda falls. Heizer sees it with his own eyes. No screams, no Hollywood drama, just the dull thud of impact and the body of his friend vanishing into the bottomless abyss of the south face. Artur is left alone on the vertical wall. All around him is the whistle of the wind and the emptiness that just swallowed a man. Shock hits him like a wave of ice. Heizer descends to camp on autopilot, with a scorched hole burned inside him. He has just been baptized by death, the cruelest exam in mountaineering. Many people break after something like that. They drop their gear and retreat to the lowlands for good. Artur sits in base camp, stunned by his loss, and it seems like his career is over. But he's being watched by a pair of sharp eyes. Jerzy Kukuczka, the legend, the man of granite, sees not a broken victim in this young man, but a fighter. Kukuczka understands. Heizer survived where others die, and he kept his sanity. Jurek approaches him, not with condolences, but with a proposition. He sees an equal in Artur, a man with the makings of a champion. Instead of sending the kid home to heal, Kukuczka invites him on his next, even crazier projects. And so, born from tragedy, one of the most effective partnerships in the history of world mountaineering begins. Trying to keep up with Jerzy Kukuczka in 1986 was, in many people's opinion, a sophisticated form of self-destruction. But for Artur Heizer, it was the only way to find out what he was really made of. They stand at the foot of Manaslu. The objective is audacious, a new route up the northeast face. And most importantly, the style. No Himalayan siege, no caravans of Sherpas, no oxygen bottles. Just pure alpine style. That means they shoulder their packs and go, with no room for error or retreat. Their entire camp, their food, their warmth is on their backs. Artur quickly realizes he's stepped into a meat grinder. Kukuczka is famous for his inhuman pace and his ability to endure a level of discomfort that would break ordinary people. Heizer has to switch into overdrive. Every step is a fight, not just against gravity, but against his own weakness. He forces himself not to fall a single meter behind, gritting his teeth and pushing himself to a limit he never even knew he had. On November 10th, 1986, this race for survival pays off. They are standing on the summit of Manaslu, at 8,163 meters. All around them is thin air and an endless frozen expanse. For Heizer, this is a moment of truth, his first 8,000er. He didn't just make it, he did it as part of a two-man team with the greatest climber of the era. In that thin air, something more important than the ascent itself happens. Kukuczka sees that the elephant not only kept the pace, but also maintained his mental clarity and ability to work. There is no longer a student and a master. There is a partnership. Heizer solidifies his status as the primary partner of a living legend. Now he knows. He can perform where others are just trying to survive. And they would need that confidence very soon, because a real winter was waiting for them. In the winter of '87, the Himalayas become a hostile, alien world, where the air burns your lungs and the wind can rip a tent to shreds. Jerzy Kukuczka and Artur Heiser arrive at the base of the north face of Annapurna, one of the most treacherous mountains on the planet. The statistics here are stacked against you. 1 in 3 climbers who attempt this summit never come back. But our heroes choose an even more insane scenario. They're going in winter. There's no time for a long siege. The calendar winter is ending, and the monsoons are already breathing down their necks. They make a decision that sends a chill down the spine of traditional mountaineers. A lightning assault. No weeks of acclimatization, no endless fixing of ropes. They're betting on speed, trying to slip through a weather window between hurricanes. It's a race against death, where the prize is life itself. On February 3rd, Heiser and Kukuczka begin their final push. They are climbing without supplemental oxygen. Up at 8,000 meters, you take 10 breaths for every single step. Your brain switches into survival mode, shutting down everything non-essential. Emotion, fear, pain. All that's left is pure, raw will, and they do it. For the first time in history, human beings stand on the summit of Annapurna in winter. But the euphoria lasts only seconds. The sun dips below the horizon, and the temperature instantly plummets to -40. It's as if the mountain is taking revenge for their audacity. The descent begins, and it turns into a living hell. They move in total darkness, by feel alone, teetering on the edge of physical collapse. Heiser's body, drained by the ascent, is running on fumes. Down in base camp, the radio operator listens to the crackle of static, terrified that the silence will become permanent. They don't descend as conquerors. They descend as survivors of a catastrophe. Frostbitten faces, empty eyes, but they are alive. Back in Poland, they're treated like astronauts returning from the moon. Newspapers run headlines about the ice warriors. For Heiser, this is a turning point. Now, no one would dare call him just Kukuczka's backpack. He has proven to the world, and to himself, that he can withstand unimaginable cold and perform where steel itself shatters. Artur Heiser has joined the elite of the world's high-altitude mountaineering. For most climbers, pioneering a new route is a lifetime achievement. But for the duo of Kukuczka and Heiser, it's becoming routine. In the autumn of 1987, they don't even think about resting after the winter hell on Annapurna. Figuratively speaking, their helicopter never even shuts down its engine. Their new target is Shishapangma, and once again, they refuse to follow a well-trodden path. They set their sights on the West Ridge, a line other climbers avoid, deeming it too risky, too illogical. Heiser and Kukuczka enter this white desert as if they own it. They work with the precision of surgeons, cutting into the mountain's unknown flesh. On September 18, 1987, they stand on the west summit at 7,966 meters. True, it's not the main summit of the massif, but the value of this climb lies elsewhere. They have drawn a completely new line on the map of the Himalayas. In his early 20s, Artur Heiser is already a phenomenon. There's almost no one else his age with a track record like his. First ascents, winter assaults, performing at 8,000 meters. He's becoming one of the most effective high-altitude climbers on the planet, a machine that never breaks down. But this marathon is just getting started. The year is 1988. The mountains are calling again, and again, it's Annapurna. You might wonder, why go back to a place that nearly killed you just a year and a half ago? But this time, they choose the east summit at 8,010 meters, and again, no compromises. They attack the mountain via the southeast face. This is a sheer wall that demands not just endurance, but virtuosic rock climbing skill at a colossal altitude. On October 13th, they get the job done. Another new route for the annals of Polish mountaineering. The partnership is flawless. You see, at this point, a consensus is forming in the climbing world. For these two, nothing is impossible. They don't just climb mountains, they rewrite the rules of the game. Kukuczka is all experience and animal instinct. Heiser is youth, power, and cold, hard calculation. They understand each other without words, just by the tension on the rope. This is the peak of their power. They seem invincible, like gods who have descended to earth to show mortals how to walk in the mountains. The entire world watches them, holding its breath, because every one of their expeditions ends in triumph. It seems like this streak of luck will last forever. 5 lives are wiped out in an instant, as a massive avalanche tears down the Lola Pass. May of 1989 on Everest turns into a nightmare. An entire team of Polish climbers is swept away. By some miracle, only one survives, Andrzej Marciniak. But his situation is worse than being on death row. He's stranded at 6,000 meters, his goggles are gone, and snow blindness is slowly plunging his world into a white darkness. He has no gear to descend into Nepal through the deadly Khumbu icefall. His way down is cut off. The only way out is up and over the border, into China, but he's injured, blind, and completely alone. In Kathmandu, Artur Heizer understands. The clock is ticking. Andrzej is running out of air, food, and strength. Heizer steps into the role of a general, commanding a war for one man's life. He devises a plan that sounds like sheer madness. Marciniak can only be saved from the north by going through Tibet. But here, Heizer faces a wall more formidable than any mountain. China is in turmoil over the events at Tiananmen Square. The borders are sealed tight, martial law is in effect, and diplomats are just shrugging their shoulders. No one is going to let foreigners into Tibet at a time like this. Heizer goes into full-on diplomatic battering ram mode. He gets embassies involved, uses every contact he has, pushing, pleading, and demanding. Incredibly, he breaks through the political blockade. China gives the green light, but permission isn't enough. He needs a special forces team of mountaineers. Artur finds 2 guys willing to risk it all, New Zealanders Rob Hall and Gary Ball. In the future, these names will become legendary, but right now, they're just 2 guys ready to race into the unknown on Heizer's call. And so begins an operation that would later be called Thunderbolt. They jump in a truck and tear along mountain roads, ignoring exhaustion. It's a forced march, pushing engines and human bodies to their absolute limits. They approach the wall from the north and begin their assault. Heizer, Hall, and Ball move upward at a sprinter's pace. They know that somewhere up there, in a snow hole, a man is already saying his goodbyes to life. When they reach the Lola Pass, Marciniak is barely responsive. The voices of his rescuers sound like a hallucination. They grab him, literally tearing him from Everest's cold embrace. The descent is precise, with no wasted emotion. They bring Andrzej to safety. The mountaineering world gives them a standing ovation. For this operation, for its impossible logistics and sheer force of will, Artur Heizer receives the prestigious Fair Play Award. He shows everyone that a true leader isn't the one who stands on the summit, but the one who brings his people home, even when both geography and geopolitics are against him. The fate of the greatest climber of his era hangs on a thin, 6mm rope bought at a bazaar in Kathmandu. It's October 1989. Jerzy Kukuczka is back to settle his biggest piece of unfinished business, the south face of Lhotse, the same face that had already tried to kill him and Heizer. But this time, the script is different. Artur isn't on the summit team. The elephant is on the sidelines, maybe due to logistical issues, maybe due to the accumulated fatigue from the insane Everest rescue. For the first time in a long while, Kukuczka is making the final push without his trusted partner. Ryszard Pawłowski is belaying him. On October 24th, the drama reaches its climax at 8,200 meters. The summit is deceptively close. The sun is bathing the slope in light, but one wrong step changes everything. Kukuczka falls. The rope that should save his life turns out to be too old. It can't handle the dynamic force of the fall. It snaps with a sharp, dry crack. Pawłowski, frozen in horror, watches as his partner's figure disappears into the 2-kilometer abyss. A ringing silence hangs on the face. The mountain that once took Rafał Choda before Heizer's eyes now claims his mentor. When the news of the tragedy reaches Heizer, his world shatters. This isn't just grief for a friend, it's a foundational collapse. For him, Kukuczka was an unshakable rock, a symbol that human will was stronger than gravity. If the mountains could break the iron Jurek, then there are no winners in this game. Falling into that abyss with Kukuczka's body is the entire golden age of Polish Himalayan climbing. The era of great first ascents, daring winter expeditions, and national pride ends in a single second. Poland is plunged into mourning, and the climbing community is left stunned and bewildered. Heidzer's reaction to this is the most radical of all. He doesn't take a break. He doesn't seek solace on new peaks. He makes a decision as sharp and final as the blow of an ice axe. He's done. Artur decides he's had enough of death, risk, and cold. He quits mountaineering completely. He cuts all ties, stops answering calls from his climbing partners, and literally erases himself from the world of the mountains. The man who was tipped to be the new king of the Himalayas voluntarily gives up his crown. A 15-year silence begins, one in which there is no room for crampons, ice axes, or thin air. Heidzer chooses a life on the plains, convinced he has closed that door forever. Artur Heidzer may have walked away from the Himalayan walls, but his appetite for risk didn't disappear. It just changed its form. The 1990s in Poland are a time of wild, untamed capitalism, the perfect environment for a man with the grip of the elephant. He trades his ice axe for a calculator, and instead of charting mountain routes, he starts mapping out financial strategies. The energy that once drove him to the summits of 8,000ers is now channeled into building a business empire. In 1993, Heidzer teams up with his old friend, Janusz Meyer. They create the brand Alpinus. And here, Artur plays his ace. The experience of that same teenager who spent his nights sewing down jackets on his mother's machine. He isn't just a businessman in a suit, he's a technologist who knows the value of every single stitch. He understands that a bad zipper on a jacket in the city is an inconvenience, but at 8,000 meters, it's a death sentence. Heidzer implements technologies that make Alpinus the undisputed market leader. All of Poland, from students to professionals, is wearing his jackets. The brand becomes synonymous with quality, a national obsession. But business summits prove to be just as treacherous as the slopes of Lhotse. Heidzer runs his business the same way he climbed with Kukuczka, aggressively, fast, and on the edge. The company expands at a frantic pace, opening huge stores, taking out loans. It's a classic blitzkrieg assault, but this time, in the world of economics. But the market doesn't forgive miscalculations. By the early 2000s, the debt load becomes critical. In 2004, a financial avalanche comes crashing down. Alpinus declares bankruptcy. For Heidzer, it's a devastating blow. He loses everything: his assets, his property, his status as a millionaire. Bailiffs are cataloging his possessions, while former partners refuse to meet his eye. It feels like he's plunged into the abyss all over again, just like back on Lhotse. But Artur is a master of survival. On the smoldering ruins of his empire, without even pausing to reflect, he immediately starts building a new brand, High Mountain. He's starting from scratch with that same old obsession. And to get the new brand off the ground, he makes a brilliant play. Heidzer starts sponsoring mountaineering expeditions. He's back on the scene, but not as a climber just yet. He's a manager now, the guy with the checkbook. He's paying for other people's dreams, looking at photos from the summits. And he can feel it. That old, long-forgotten pull of the high peaks, waking up inside him with a new intensity. 15 years on the sidelines is a death sentence for any athlete. But Artur Heidzer decides the rules just don't apply to him. In 2005, he does what many consider insane. He trades his comfortable CEO chair for the icy winds of the Karakoram. His target is Broad Peak, the 12th highest 8,000er in the world. Artur is convinced that his body, like a trusty old engine, just needs to be jump-started to work as well as it did in the golden years. He pushes upward, tasting the familiar thin air, and for a moment, it feels like time really has turned back. But at 8,000 meters, the mountain brutally reminds him of reality. It's a simple but fatal accident. One wrong step, a misplaced foot on the hard fern snow, and a dry crack echoes through the air. Heidzer has broken his leg. Anywhere else in the world, it's just an injury that needs a cast. In the death zone, it's effectively a death sentence. A person who can't walk on their own at this altitude is usually doomed. He becomes an 80-kilogram dead weight that needs to be lowered down sheer ice walls, where every rescuer is risking their own life. The situation becomes critical. Piotr Pustelnik, another titan of Polish mountaineering, takes command of the rescue. He launches what can only be described as a full-scale military operation on the slope. Calls for help fly out over the radio, and everyone on the mountain answers. Italians, Russians, Poles. Expeditions abandon their own ambitions to save the elephant. Broad Peak becomes a stage for an unprecedented display of solidarity. They bundle Hadzer into a sleeping bag, secure him with ropes, and begin the endless, agonizing descent. It's hellish work. They drag him down, inch by agonizing inch. The operation lasts for several days. People are exhausted. They take turns, but they keep hauling their comrade down. Hadzer, who was always the engine, the rescuer, the leader, now lies there, a helpless bundle, staring at the sky. For his ego, this is a blow worse than the fracture itself. The myth of the invincible elephant, who could do anything, shatters into dust. He is seeing the limits of his own power. When he's finally brought down to base camp and evacuated, many think, well, that's definitely it now. The veteran is broken, he's learned his lesson, and he'll go into quiet retirement and babysit his grandkids. But they don't know Hadzer. Lying in a hospital bed, his leg in traction, he isn't writing his memoirs. He's already planning how to get back in shape for the next round. Nobody believes you can step into the same river twice, especially when that river is a frozen torrent at 8,000 meters, and you have a history of a complex fracture and 15 years of downtime. Skeptics tap their heads when they hear Hadzer's name. They say his time has passed, that he's a dinosaur from another century. But on May 11th, 2008, the radio waves crackle with a short message. Artur Hadzer is standing on the summit of Dhaulagiri. Beside him is Robert Shimchak, and it's symbolic, the doctor and the patient who conquered the White Mountain together. For Hadzer, this success is more important than any medal. It's proof that the old elephant hasn't just licked his wounds. He's reclaimed his legendary power. His body is once again working like a diesel engine in the freezing cold, reliable and unstoppable. But one summit isn't enough to silence all the critics. He needs the killer mountain. 2 years later, in June of 2010, Hadzer takes on Nanga Parbat. He chooses the classic but brutally difficult Kinshofar route. The Kinshofar wall is a vertical bastion that squeezes every last drop of energy out of a climber. Hadzer tackles it with the confidence of a tank. On June 23rd, he's on the summit. Now, no one has any doubts. He's not just back, he's back in the elite. He is physically capable of leading, making tough decisions, and pulling a team forward. But it's here, at his peak, that Artur is hit by a heavy realization. He looks around the base camps and sees a frightening picture. All around him are Spanish, Italian, and Russian climbers, commercial tourists. But where are the Poles? Where is the so-called Polish mafia that dominated the Himalayas in the 80s? They're gone. He sees a vacuum. There's him, the veteran, the last of the Mohicans, and then there's an empty space. The connection between generations has been severed. The youth are on climbing walls in Warsaw, but they're too scared or don't know how to tackle the big mountains. Hadzer understands. If nothing is done, Polish Himalayism will die with him. The legend of the Ice Warriors will exist only on the pages of dusty books. This thought terrifies him more than any avalanche. Artur decides his personal climbs are meaningless if there's no one to pass the torch to. A plan is born in his mind, one with a scale comparable to the siege of Everest. He envisions not just an expedition, but an entire national program. He wants to find the young, the bold, and the hungry, pull them out of their warm gyms, and throw them into the cold of the Karakoram to forge them into new champions. Hadzer is ready to become for them what Kukuchka once was for him, a guide into the major leagues. Imagine a to-do list that would make a normal person's knees buckle, conquer the harshest peaks of the Karakoram in winter, where temperatures drop to minus 60 degrees and the wind sweeps people into the abyss like feathers. This is the exact challenge Artur Hadzer lays down in 2010. He officially launches the Polish Winter Himalayism program, though his name would be added to it later. For now, it's PHZ, a project on a national scale. His goal is obscenely ambitious, to claim all the remaining winter virgins, the 8,000ers that no human had yet set foot on during the cold season. Hadzer doesn't act like a romantic, but like the CEO of a major corporation. He puts on a suit and goes to the ministries, to sponsors, to the president. He sells them the dream of restoring national glory, and it works. Government money and sponsorship deals begin to flow. Artur creates a structure where mountaineering stops being a hobby for individuals and becomes a job. He's building a factory for producing champions. But money is just the fuel. He needs engines. Hazer announces an all-out draft. He gathers young people from all over Poland and puts them through a brutal process of natural selection. The Tatra and the Alps become his training grounds. Artur pushes the candidates to their limits, making them run marathons with backpacks, testing their mental fortitude. He's looking for that same glint in their eyes that Kukuchka once saw in him. He doesn't just need strong athletes, he needs fanatics, willing to endure hellish cold for a higher purpose. The old guard of climbers watches this with unconcealed skepticism. Whispers start in the corridors, then become open criticism. This is Hazer's kindergarten. The veterans laugh at the idea of Artur leading green youngsters up deadly walls. They see it as a reckless venture bordering on criminal. Criticism pours in from all sides. Journalists ask uncomfortable questions about the competence of the participants. Hazer is called a babysitter, leading children to their slaughter. But Artur ignores the ridicule. He becomes a public shield for his protégés. He takes the full media blow himself, acting as the ideologue and visionary. What's more, he doesn't sit back in a warm office in Warsaw. Hazer acts like a true field commander. He puts on his down jacket and goes with them. He becomes a player coach, showing by his own example how to survive in the death zone. He shares cramped tents with the young guys, eats freeze-dried food, and freezes in the wind, proving that the dad of the program is willing to risk just as much as his kids. The critics' words mean nothing at 8,000 meters, and Artur Hazer knows the best way to shut them up. He needs a result, one that will shine brighter than any gold. In the autumn of 2011, he leads his team to Makalu, the 5th highest peak in the world. And here, on the slopes of this giant, the PHZ program finally lays its trump card on the table. Among the participants, a young guy with a defiant look and phenomenal physical conditioning stands out, Adam Bilecki. Hazer sees in him a reflection of himself 30 years ago. The same hunger, the same animalistic endurance. On September 30th, they stand on the summit of Makalu together, the veteran and his best discovery. This ascent becomes a turning point. Artur proves to everyone his incubator works. He's not just guiding tourists, he's cultivating an elite, capable of performing without oxygen in the death zone. But Makalu is just a warm-up for the main event. The winter of 2012 arrives. The target is Gasherbrum 1, the hidden peak in the Karakoram, which had never been summited in winter. This time, Hazer trades his ice axe for a radio. He stays at base camp. Now, he's the brains of the operation, the grandmaster moving pieces across an icy chessboard. This test of his nerves proves to be more terrifying than any summit push. Sitting in a tent, peering at the slope through binoculars, and waiting for a crackle over the radio, it's pure torture for a man of action. On March 9th, the tension at base camp reaches its peak. Adam Bilecki and Janusz Gołąb set out for the summit. The weather gives them a tiny window, and they sink their teeth into it. The wind on the ridge is strong enough to knock you off your feet, and the cold seeps through even the best down suits, chilling you to the bone. Down below, Hazer is practically hypnotizing the radio. And then, a voice cuts through the static. "We're on the summit." It's a historic moment. The Poles have just completed the first winter ascent of Gasherbrum 1. The Polish Winter Himalayism program has made a triumphant return, putting the country back in the big leagues. The critics who called the project a kindergarten are forced to eat their words. Hazer's kids have done what the world's best climbers couldn't. Artur returns to Poland a victor. The president awards him the Officer's Cross of the Order of Polonia Restituta. As Hazer stands in the presidential palace, it seems his vision has been completely vindicated. He's built a machine of success. He's found his successors, and as far as he can see, the future holds nothing but more victories and glittering peaks. But a victory in the death zone only lasts as long as a climber has the strength to get back down. In the winter of 2013, Hazer's program sets its sights on Broad Peak. It's the most ambitious and complex expedition in the project's history. This time, Artur stays in Poland. He's managing the operation remotely, sitting in a warm office in front of monitors and phones, while the legendary Krzysztof Wilicki commands the team on the glacier. Heizer has crafted the perfect plan, but mountains don't follow business plans. On March 5th, 4 Polish climbers stand on the summit. Adam Bilecki, Artur Małek, Tomasz Kowalski, and the veteran Maciej Berbeka. It should have been another resounding triumph. They'd done the impossible, written their names into history. But the joy at base camp turns to anxiety, which quickly escalates into horror. The sun is setting, and the temperature is plummeting to critical levels. The group gets stretched out. A drama begins to unfold, and Heizer is watching it all live via satellite link, powerless to change a thing. The radio traffic brings terrible news. Tomasz Kowalski, a young, strong athlete, is simply shutting down. His body is exhausted. He tells Wieliki he can't take another step. He says he's just going to sit for a bit, take a rest. In mountaineering, that's a synonym for death. Heizer hears these transmissions, hears the life fading from a man he personally selected for the program. And Maciej Berbeka, the legend who had returned to the mountains after years away, simply vanishes into the darkness. He heads down and dissolves into the icy night, never making radio contact again. Instead of celebratory champagne, a nightmare is waiting for Artur. Of the 4 heroes, only 2 make it back down, Bilecki and Małek. Berbeka and Kowalski remain on the mountain forever. For Heizer, it becomes a personal hell. He has to do the worst thing a leader can do, call the families. He has to explain to wives and mothers why their loved ones were left in the ice. The full weight of the tragedy lands on his shoulders. Heizer is instantly transformed from a national hero who revived Polish mountaineering into a target. Reporters demand answers, microphones are shoved in his face, newspaper headlines scream about unjustifiable risk. He's forced to stand before the cameras, pale and gaunt, justifying the fact that mountains kill. Artur realizes that the program, his brainchild, has a crack in it that can't be patched over with metals. The price of success turned out to be too high, and he's the one left to pay the bill. The silence of the mountains is terrifying, but the noise that erupts down below proves to be even more destructive. In the spring of 2013, Poland isn't celebrating a historic achievement. It's holding a public trial. The media landscape explodes. Newspapers, talk shows, internet forums, they're all buzzing with the same topic, the Broad Peak tragedy. And at the center of this hurricane stands Artur Heizer. Yesterday's hero, who had restored the nation's pride, is being dragged through the mud today. Society is looking for someone to blame. It needs a scapegoat, and the head of the program is the perfect fit. The accusations rain down like a rockfall. They bring up everything. Old grievances from colleagues who had kept quiet for years now surface. They smell blood in the water. Heizer is called a dictator, a cynical manager playing with human lives to satisfy his own ambitions. They talk about poor preparation, about how he pressured the climbers, forcing them to take risks. The PHZ program, once a symbol of success, is now branded a death machine. His every decision, every order, is put under a microscope by people who've never climbed higher than the 3rd floor. Heizer chooses the most difficult path. He doesn't shift the blame to the weather, to bad luck, or to the mistakes of the deceased. He goes before the press and says, "I am the leader, I am responsible." He takes the entire burden upon himself. But this shield he holds up for the cameras does nothing to protect his soul. Inside, Artur is falling apart. The guilt over the deaths of Tomasz and Maciej is eating him alive. He, a man of action, sinks into a heavy, suffocating depression. Those close to him watch the fire go out in the eyes of the elephant. But even in this state, he finds the strength for one last fight. The main brunt of the criticism falls not just on him, but on the survivors. Adam Bilecki, the program's golden boy, is accused of cowardice and selfishness for descending first, for separating from the group. Heizer sees the mob ready to tear the young climber to pieces, and Artur steps between them. He fiercely defends Bilecki, trying to explain the laws of the death zone, where the morality of the flatlands simply doesn't apply. He takes on fresh waves of hatred, just to save the reputation and the sanity of his student. Heizer knows that if he gives up now, Polish mountaineering will be buried under the rubble of this scandal. There are places you run to, not for glory, but for silence, even if that silence can kill you. In July of 2013, Artur Heiser packs his bag not like an athlete preparing for a record, but like a man who's been backed into a corner. The noise back in Poland has become unbearable. Every phone call is an interrogation. Every glance on the street feels like an accusation. He needs to get off the grid, to disappear somewhere. There are no reporters, no prosecutors, and no armchair experts. He chooses the Karakorum. The expedition plan looks daunting, even for the elite. Heiser is aiming for a full traverse of the Gasherbrum Massif. The idea sounds like madness. Ascend Gasherbrum 1, then, without descending to base camp, cross the razor-sharp ridge at nearly 8,000 meters and assault Gasherbrum 2. This isn't just climbing. It's a survival marathon in the stratosphere. Several days in the death zone, with no rest, no real sleep, and minimal food. Artur calls it a dress rehearsal. The official story for sponsors and the press is ambitious. It's training for the ultimate goal of his life, a winter ascent of K2. He convinces everyone that this traverse is necessary to test his body to its limits before taking on the King of the Mountains. Heiser continues to play the part of the visionary, looking to the future, but those who know him well understand K2 is just an excuse. The real reason is escape. He desperately needs to be somewhere. The only enemy is the wind, not public opinion. The mountains are honest. They can kill you, but they don't lie, and they don't betray you. His partner is Marcin Kaszkan, a man solid as a rock, quiet, dependable, a biophysicist who knows exactly what altitude does to the body. They go as a pair, without a large entourage. It's a return to the roots, to pure alpinism. But at base camp, the atmosphere is strange, heavy. There's none of the excitement from the program's early successes. The air feels charged with the tension Heiser has brought with him from Europe. They work in silence, focused, as if performing some heavy labor. Artur looks exhausted before he even sets foot on the route. The psychological burden weighs more heavily on his shoulders than a 100-kilogram pack. He's trying to treat his depression with hypoxia, hoping that, at an altitude where the brain is fighting for every breath of oxygen, the thoughts of his dead friends and his ruined reputation will finally recede. The expedition becomes a grim journey of two solitary figures among the ice giants, where every step upward is an attempt to escape what's waiting down below. 7,600 meters. It's an altitude where ambition shatters against the simple physics of the atmosphere. On July 7, 2013, Artur Heiser and Marcin Kaszkan hit this invisible wall. They leave Camp 3 at 7,150 meters, full of determination. The summit of Gasherbrum 1 is only 400 vertical meters away. At sea level, a trained athlete could cover that distance in a couple of minutes. But up here, in the thin air, it's hours of grueling labor. They push upward, but the Karakorum decides to spring its trap. The weather turns in an instant, as if someone just flipped a switch. A hurricane-force wind descends, carrying blinding snow. Visibility drops to zero. Heiser, the experienced strategist, understands. To continue climbing would be signing their own death warrant. The summit is lost in a whiteout, and they make the only sane decision: to turn back. The dream of the traverse, the training for K2, is melting away before their eyes. Now, the mission is stripped down to a single primal instinct: get down alive. The way down is through the Japanese couloir. It's a narrow, steep gully filled with snow and ice, a natural wind tunnel. Descending here is harder than climbing up. Their legs are shot, concentration is fading due to the lack of oxygen. They aren't roped together. It's every man for himself, so one person's fall won't drag the other down. And in that moment, something happens that turns reality on its head. Heiser sees Kaszkan's figure lose its balance and start sliding down the slope. In Artur's mind, clouded by hypoxia and stress, the image is unequivocal. His partner has fallen into the abyss. Heiser pulls out his phone. With trembling fingers, he types a message to his wife, Isabella. The text is short, stark, and terrifying. Marcin has fallen. That message flies to Poland, setting off a wave of shock and horror. Kaszkan's family, the media, rescue services, everyone is certain that Marcin is dead. And at that moment, Heiser is convinced he is alone on the mountain. But the mountains are a place where your eyes can lie to you. In reality, Marcin Kaszkan had not fallen into the void. He did slip. He fell a few meters, but managed to dig in his ice axe and stop the fall. He's alive. He gets up, brushes the snow off, and keeps going down, with no idea that his own leader has already declared him dead. But up above him, a real tragedy is unfolding, and in a terrifying twist of irony, the roles are about to be reversed. The man who just reported his partner's death now finds himself a hair's breadth from his own. Artur Heiser, certain that he's lost his friend, continues the descent completely alone. He takes one step, then another, and then, in an instant, the mountain pulls the ground out from under him. That fateful text message becomes a prophecy, but not for the man it was about. 500 meters of empty space become Artur Heiser's final route. No one will ever know exactly what happened in that fatal second on the slopes of the Japanese couloir. Was it a simple mistake with a carabiner made by tired hands? A sudden gust of wind that knocked an unguarded man off his feet? Or maybe just a momentary blackout from pure exhaustion? The mountain holds that secret as tightly as the ice holds the history of our planet. We only know one thing for sure. Gravity doesn't give second chances. The body of the legendary The Elephant plummets down the icy chute, striking against rock outcroppings until the momentum of the fall finally dies out on the snowfield below. Meanwhile, Marcin Kockan, the man from the text message, the one who was supposedly dead, is still making his way down. He's alive, focused, and moving carefully. He descends further, and at an altitude of 6,400 meters, he spots a bright patch of color against the snow. It's a down jacket. As he gets closer, he realizes that the terrible miscommunication has become reality, but in the exact opposite way he could have imagined. Lying before him is his leader. Kockan leans down, checks for a pulse, but there's nothing medicine can do here. Artur Heiser was killed instantly. The injuries from a fall of that magnitude are not survivable. Marcin is left alone with his friend's body, surrounded by the infinite icy silence of the Karakoram. He now faces the hardest satellite phone call of his life. The news travels to Poland, to Artur's wife, Isabella, and there, thousands of kilometers away, the family makes a courageous decision, perhaps the only one that truly makes sense for a mountaineer. They ask him not to bring the body down. They don't want to risk Kockan's life or the lives of any other rescuers, just to transport a body through the treacherous ice falls. Artur should remain where his heart always was, in the great mountains. Kockan honors the family's final wish. He finds a deep glacial crevasse at the base of the wall. This isn't a cemetery with marble headstones. This is eternal ice, and it will be his mausoleum. Gathering the last of his strength, Marcin carries his partner's body and commits it to the blue abyss of the glacier. He says a prayer, kneeling in the snow, with the sound of the wind that never, ever stops howling here. There is a chilling, almost mystical symmetry to this ending. Artur Heiser's fate mirrors that of his teacher and idol, Jerzy Kukuczka. Just as Kukuczka was laid to rest forever on the south face of Lhotse, Heiser now finds his peace beneath the wall of Gasherbrum. The circle is complete. The student and the teacher are roped together once more. Only this time, their route doesn't lead to a summit, but into eternity. They become a part of the mountain landscape itself, solemn guardians of the Karakoram and the Himalayas. The story of the elephant's time on Earth ends here, at 6,400 meters. But this is where the legend begins, a legend that will outlive us all.